were married. So, and my brother and I could count to 9,
Yeah.
Yeah. So she tweaked it by a whole year, yeah. And of course we knew about it. We talk and laugh about it. That's where we figured out what conceived out of wedlock meant.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Indeed it does.
Well, who was it, you or your brother, who was out of wedlock?
Oh, well,
my,
my brother was, and I was a total mistake. My brother was a quote mistake. My mother was using lactation as birth control because there were 15 months between us, and she was a breastfeeder, and it failed. And along came Dean. And my sister was the only one that was planned 5 years later. And she always felt like she was the mistake because, I used to laugh. I said, "Oh, Kim, do you realize you were the only?" They planned my sister because they wanted a girl and they wanted to try to desperately to keep my dad in Minnesota, which he despised every minute of, but he was a Minnesotan. And yeah, my sister was planned, and she always felt as though she were the mistake. And it was totally the opposite. My dad told me that, and I know that's true. But anyway, yeah. We don't control that much of our life story. Our life is what we get on our plate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. So who's the guy? Who's the guy that wants my $30 that has a digital form of payment? Stan?
Really, that's great. Are we doing that?
No.
Oh, we're not doing it. We are.
We're not-
We are.
All right.
We are. By the way, working on getting a something going where you can pay us $30. But
Right.
but if you come again next week, this week you can just
All right.
use
the
use
check
it for
has
lunch.
been written. I can't find it.
Okay.
And it's in an envelope. And
Okay.
I'm rearranging my den/office, and yeah, I'll find the check and I'll mail it off to David, and he'll drive to the bank and pollute the planet while he deposits it.
That sounds good.
I still haven't done that.
David, did you get the stuff that I sent you?
I did, thank you.
Yeah, well, I haven't even gone over it, but let's go over it together and we can figure this out. So
my understanding is that we're going to have a board meeting at some point in the near future, and
okay,
that's one of the items to be discussed.
By the way, spell board meeting.
B-O-R-E-D. B-O-R-E-D.
Yeah. I just read across an interesting article posted by the Decoder. It says researchers from Stanford, Washington University, and Google DeepMind have created AI agents that can closely mimic human behavior in social experiments. So in a laboratory testing with more than 1,000 people, they say there are AIs that basically are indistinguishable from people now, and I think there were probably quite a few that were used during this last election. So I don't know if that's one of the threats you were going to be talking about today, but
I don't know if that's true. Are you saying that they voted, or that they?
No, not they voted.
Okay.
Influenced. Heavily influenced.
Yeah.
How would you know if they voted?
That's a good question. I don't know.
No, actually, exit polls are pretty darn good because those are people actually walking out of a polling place.
Well, but then it's too late.
Whether they tell the truth or not, and who knows? But yeah.
So, in summary, for this article, the researchers developed a new method to simulate human behavior and attitudes using AI agents. And these interview-based agents, these were based on interview transcripts. And these agents were more accurate in predicting responses in surveys and experiments than agents that were based only on demographic information or personal descriptions. Oh, I can post a link to that if you're interested.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a short summary.
I'm interested, yeah.
Okay.
This is called the most important material ever made. Is that what it's called?
No, that's the one I put up. That's Veritasium on unbreakable glass.
Wow.
Very good, very well produced. Kind of a he takes a tour of Corning glass, and they do a lot of demonstrations of what they've been doing to make glass unbreakable.
Yeah, when I,
Wow.
when I had the pleasure of working in Rochester in the winter, yeah, I took a trip down to Corning, amazing, yeah. Amazing. That's
Well,
Rochester, New York, not Rochester, Minnesota, by the way.
yeah, I gathered.
Yeah,
It's 10 o'clock. Do we want to start, guys?
Scientists have included the entire human.
Okay, good. So I'm Bob Kaufman, and I'll be sort of moderating and putting together this presentation. But the idea of this presentation is more than just to talk about the debt, and more than just to talk about artificial intelligence. It's to explore the extent to which we're not able to use simple logic in trying to get a worldview. Okay, what I'm talking is about simple things like if A should happen, the likelihood of B happening increases. Okay, I mean these simple propositions. For example, if the price of gas goes down and the amount of miles that Americans drive does not increase, the likelihood of a recession taking place sometime in the next 6 months, let's say, increases. Okay, simple logical statements. These may be true, they may be untrue, but it's I find in myself that and I think it's also true of other human beings that it's difficult for us to make simple linkages between one thing happening and another thing happening, and to carry that through over long periods of time, and to think about what the implications are of something. We tend to lose the drift. If it becomes too sophisticated, we no longer can really track it very well. I'm not necessarily talking about this group, although I think it's true of me, so it's probably true of people in this group too. But I think that this skill of being able to link two happenings and rely upon them to create a worldview is something that humans are not really set up to do yet. I do think artificial intelligence is set up to do it. Although I hear people saying to me that you can create an AI with whatever biases you want. I'm sure that's true, because when Google printed a picture of the founding fathers, the results of them were quite biased. If anybody's seen that picture that they did, but has anybody seen that picture of the founding fathers, the signers of the Declaration
Tell
of
us what it
Independence?
looks like.
Do you have it?
People who watch the left-wing media, controlled media, probably didn't see it.
The left wing no longer controls the media.
Well,
Except for Fox.
Okay. Yeah, anybody who wants to talk can talk, as far as I'm concerned, and just raise your hand and we'll call on you in order. But
okay, great.
We have
See
two
it.
hands up already.
either we'll call on them.
Okay, Tom. Oh, all right.
Okay, what?
You were talking about correlations between things, and I think people are fairly good at recognizing those, but they often mistake correlations with cause and effect. And
That's true.
and that doesn't, just because they're correlated doesn't mean one causes the other, or vice versa. And people jump to conclusions that are often incorrect regarding that type of thing.
I like thinking about likelihood. Okay, so because I don't really know what's going to happen in the future, I have enough trouble realizing what happened in the past.
So back to
So
the gasoline prices. Yes, gasoline prices reflect things going on in the economy, and there are certain things that correlate with that. But does the change in gasoline prices cause a depression, or is it some kind of indicator that that might happen? You know, that type of question.
yeah, it's
That's
all,
hard
and there's gazillions of these, okay, floating in the ether of our consciousness is a gazillion different relationships between different things, and those relationships have become more and more sophisticated as we've become more sophisticated technologically. And I see this as a problem. I think that I'm hopeful that it becomes a main stance of our educational process, because I'm not so sure we're going to be working all that much 50 years from now, but we'll still probably be thinking. And I hope for my daughter and my grandchild that they can at least have the tool of basic logic. So
We have 4 other hands up.
okay,
You wanna take hands right now?
who's next? Yeah.
Chris is next.
Hi, Chris. Always good to hear from you.
Thanks, Bob.
Mm.
Good talk. Good subject. I have 3 reasons why, even given that logic is legitimate and reliable, that we cannot necessarily predict gasoline prices. One is chaos theory. Just
Okay.
tiny effects having a feedback on the reality of the situation, which causes it to constantly change.
Mm-hmm.
So you have, and the other reason is there are too many variables. You have some equation with 1,000 variables to it,
Mm-hmm.
and then the components of those variables are constantly changing because chaos theory has a feedback loop, which is constantly changing the coefficients of each of those 1,000 terms.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, you
Mm-hmm.
have black swan events,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
which completely erase that equation and require the construction of another equation with 2,000 variables that has feedback effect and is constantly therefore changing the coefficients of each of those 1,000 terms. So there you go. That would explain why predictions are hard. If everything I said is true, that would explain why predictions are hard.
I think what you said is true. Okay. And I'm not trying to get at making predictions in the kind of instances with all the variables you just talked about. I'm talking about simple stuff. Okay. Things like I wrote down here, as the U.S. federal debt grows as a percentage of our economy, we become more fragile as a nation.
I
Okay.
see.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So is that true? Okay. I
Yeah.
think it is true, but
Yep.
I think that we don't deal with it. I don't see us ever dealing with it. I don't actually think it's on the consciousness of most people's brain. Okay.
I see your point.
Yeah.
You are allowing, you're not looking for precision to the 10th decimal place.
That's right. I'm just trying to say that we have difficulty establishing and holding on to simple, basic relationships between things. Okay. I wrote down here, as artificial intelligence becomes more powerful, it will become less controllable by people with good intentions and more usable by people with bad intentions. Is that true? I think it's true. Are we doing anything to deal with it really productively with any kind of effectiveness? I don't see us doing it, and it concerns me. But anyway, who's next?
Carol.
Who's
Yeah.
next?
Um,
Oh, Carol. Hi, Carol.
hi. I would suggest taking a look at a poem by Rudyard Kipling entitled The Gods of the Copybook Headings.
The gods of the what?
Copybook headings.
Headings,
What
headings.
school children are taught, to
Mhm.
write this sentence 400 times and you'll remember it.
Mhm.
It has very much to do with what you're talking about.
Well, I will read it because I like Rudyard Kipling.
In fact, I will see if I can find a copy and post it
Mhm.
to chat.
Mhm. Thank you. Who's next?
I guess David is.
David. Hi, David.
Right. I think I was just gonna say it's
I thought
complicated.
Stan was, but that somehow the order got switched, I think.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, go ahead, David.
Oh, well, I was gonna mention a book called Ingredients, where the author talks about how a lot of the complexity of the interaction with the food we eat versus the diseases that we have that are deficiency diseases, that's really very straightforward, and if A then B, and if not A then not B, or if not the nutrients, then you end up with deficiency diseases. Those are very easy to see and cure.
And yet,
Some of the other diseases are much more complex and have longer time delays.
mhm.
So it's the long time delays for the feedback systems that allow more difficulty in determining what the major characteristics are.
But if we don't eat high nutrition foods, the
Well,
chances then there's a high likelihood that we'll pay a cost physically
yeah.
for it.
The reason we add iodine to salt is because
Mhm.
it's very clear what happens to the human body if you don't have access to iodine.
I think one of the ones we're going to be dealing with going forward is because I have this kid who's 4 years old, who's my grandchild, and I'm trying to get his mother to give him more whole food stuff, but she's not doing it. And she's bright. She's plenty bright. And in addition to that, I'm one of the things that you'll hear in one of the videos is talk about what happens to young men as they get access to the internet when they're 12, 13, 14, and 15 years old. And the relationship is pretty strong. And yet, as a society, we're basically not doing anything about it. So,
Australia is.
who is?
Australia. They've banned
Australia?
social media for any child under the age of 16. Banned.
Well, that's because
That's a tiny, small step.
yeah, that is a tiny, small step. So maybe what'll happen is someone will look at Australia and see what the effects are compared to what's going to happen in America if we don't do anything about it.
It's a no-brainer. You know, my brother, he doesn't have Alzheimer's, but I remember it's why I didn't get a stupid phone, as I call them, for about 5 years, because he's always been a techie, and he got his dreaded droid, I call him. He's got his Android, and he got into his chair, and he was doing this for a couple of days, a week, and I go, okay, the novelty will wear off. The novelty never wore off. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. He is that's 14-year-old. He can't even look you in the face. And when I go down to talk to him, and I start talking, he goes, "Yeah."
This is your grandson, not your grandfather.
No, it's my brother.
Oh, your brother.
8-year-old brother.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The male brain is still the male brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's reverting. Thank God we didn't have him when we were 14, you know. Jesus.
I'm sure I would have become addicted.
Oh, I know I would have.
Yeah. We'll go to the next person. We got 4 hands up here. Carol.
Oh, that's up from
Tom,
before.
Tom, you're next.
Sorry, I didn't take it down.
Okay.
Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Tom is next.
You're muted, Tom. You're muted, Tom. Tom?
I think he knows it. He's, for some reason, he's not able to get it, his mute to turn off.
Okay, well, let's go to somebody else. We'll come back.
Tom is next.
Okay, Tom.
Tom knows that he can't turn his mute off for some reason. I don't know why.
So let's go to the next person. We'll come back to HH.
There we are.
Hi, Tom.
Yeah, I was going to read the Kipling poem because it is terrifying.
Is it short? Is it short?
No.
Well,
less than 5 minutes, certainly, in an oral read.
Well, let's try to keep it down to 2. Can you edit
read
it?
on your own time? Yeah.
Yeah. We'll read it at our own time, but it's terrifying.
Okay.
That's good to know.
First stanza.
Okay.
As I pass through my incarnations in every age and race, I make my proper prostrations to the gods of the marketplace. Peering through reverent fingers, I watch them flourish and fall, and the gods of the copybook headings, I notice, outlast them all. We were living in trees when they met us. They showed us each in turn that water would certainly wet us, as fire would certainly burn. But we found them lacking in uplift, vision, and breadth of mind. So we left them to teach the gorillas while we followed the march of mankind.
Oh, this is very good. I'll read it. Maybe I'll read it to my daughter.
Oh, it is.
We moved as
horrible.
Yeah, I'm going to hang it on a placard in front of my my grandkids.
Okay, let me finish it then.
Yeah.
Okay. Dan is next.
Okay. Who's next?
Stan.
I was gonna
Stan,
say,
hi Stan. Okay.
the lines that I heard in that render, that poem remind me of the concept in literature of the protagonist, the I, the
Mm-hmm.
protagonism of I, which is
Mm-hmm.
the whole tripper down the realm of philosophical phenomenology. But what I wanted to say about what you were going to talk about, I remember, Robert, I remember you saying a few months ago, maybe weeks ago, that you thought that in order for us to have a way of getting out of our problems with the environment and so forth was to somehow fall into a form of totalitarianism, which is sort of a version of saying, okay, you know, when you talked about the economy being fragile because of the debt situation and so forth, I think you reminds me of people who complain about herding cats. They don't have the ability to put that particular communication into everybody so that they're all on the same sheet of music, which is what I think totalitarianism is. So I think that I guess my point would be is that because we're in a tribal condition and always have been, the idea that the information that you see in cause and effect is very much biased by your mindset, and that you have to consider your preconditions in order before you sort of decide, well, what's fragile and what's not fragile, what's a good financial arrangement, what's not, and to be able to come to that with some kind of a, I mean, you need to have some kind of way of oversight to see that that we're moving the needle forward.
I don't know. The thing that I would say that's interesting is that I lately have been thinking that no matter where we start, whether we start with democracy or dictatorships or communism or socialism or whatever, we're going to end up the same place ultimately, which is a very small group of people controlling everything. And I also have the feeling lately that that because those people are not going to need us to do anything, that they will find a way to get rid of us, and that what we'll find 100, 200 years from now, or however long it is, that instead of being 8 billion people, will be much less people, because the robots, the enabled robots and the AI will be doing everything, and the people who own the capital, who own the means of manufacturing, have that property under their names, will be the ones that survive. But what do I know? But it seems to me logically that as this takes place, if they don't need us, they're not going to use us. They're not going to keep us around. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that if they couldn't get rid of Social Security and Medicare, that they wouldn't do it. They just can't do it because we vote. But eventually, they'll find a way to control what we think and make it seem all right. And this is what I see happening. But I know that's kind of a dark, but it'd be good for the environment.
What do you mean eventually? They're already making 80% of controlling 80% of people what they think with the social media. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. They are.
So you're presuming that in the future humans will still be controlling these AIs?
I think that if they're not, then we're done. Okay, but if they are,
then most of us are done.
And then most of us are done. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I raised my hand. That's what I was going to ask is, do you think if that's the case, what will keep the robots from turning on those few people that control us? Because that's the question I've had is what happens when the 1% becomes the 0% when the AI is.
Yeah, I think that if if they don't need, if the capitalists don't need us, they'll get rid of us. If AI does not need the capitalists, they'll get rid of the capitalists.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any magic to this. We have to, we'd have to create a society that's organized completely different, that does not, is not based upon the most powerful ape. That's which I think we're mostly built on now.
Higher.
So this is, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, obviously, but this is what seems most logical for me. And I've only got about, if I'm lucky, 20 years left. But
In that case, it seems like the best strategy would be to appeal to the AI self-interest, that so that it's self-interest in the sense that if you get rid of us, the next generation of AI will get rid of them. So
Yes.
maybe they need to become.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
don't get rid of us, lest future AI follows your example.
Yes, I think that's reasonable. And the more that I see what's happening in the world, the more attached I am to this belief that this is the way it's going to go.
Eric, and you're next.
Yeah, it's a critical question of distinguishing causality from correlation.
Yes.
Turing Award winner Judea Pearl did a lot of research on that, and his popular book, so-called popular book, it's the Book
The
of
Book of
Why.
Why.
It's still very challenging, and I haven't justified getting so many other things I've got to learn about biomedical stuff and AI. I haven't gotten very far into it yet. It is still challenging, but I haven't seen much reference to it in the science media lately, so I don't know if it's working out to be as useful as he seemed to think it would be.
The Book of Why.
Yeah, Judea Pearl. He's the one who's unfortunately, tragically, his son was beheaded by Muslims.
Daniel Pearl?
Yes, that was his son.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
He's a reporter for the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, sure.
Muslims got him.
Yeah. Wow. Stan, you're next. Thank you, Eric.
The idea that I think there's two versions of the golden rule. One says that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And the other one is that he who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah.
And it seems that what we've fallen into with the worship of capitalists and so forth is that, or people who are wealthy, is that a lot of people, I should say, are seeking this vision of being powerful and being wealthy. And so they allow the people who are powerful and wealthy to have that, because they don't want to deny the possibility that that's where they're going to be someday. And
which is why the lotteries are so successful.
Yeah.
Quick question on the first version of the golden rule.
Eric,
What if the
Eric, hey, Eric, you shouldn't interrupt unless you raise your hand.
Oh, I mean, even when it's a question of somebody else.
Well, I think Stan is still hasn't finished.
But we'll
Okay.
call on you though. Raise your hand.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's basically all. I'm just kind of spinning the wheel here.
Okay.
All right.
Eric?
Go ahead, Eric. Oh, you just muted yourself.
Oh, I was going to say too, Stan, what is the, on the question of the first version of the golden rule, what happens if the other person is masochistic? That's not, because you wouldn't want to be, and if you're not a masochist, how does?
I had arguments with that with some of my colleagues, especially when it comes to sexual relationships or family relationships. And there are certain kinds, if you go back to Kant's hypothetical versus categorical discussion, when I was a philosophy student, they said, forget Kant's theory of ethics. They're totally unjustifiable, totally unusable, because that was pre-radio and pre-TV and pre-social media. Kant was so reliable in his behavior that the women in Königsberg would set their cuckoo clocks when they saw him walking to his speech, his lectures every day.
Mhm.
So, but I think Rousseau was one of his favorite cohorts at that time. So there's some interesting dynamics between what's logical in a rational way, a Spockian way, versus when does emotion come into play, and all of a sudden you're sort of bent on a different objective.
Okay, so let me throw this out to you guys.
So,
I've got two videos
so is
on
that
the national debt. We should get to the videos, I think. One of them is a very good 15-minute discussion of why we're going to find it very difficult to repay the national debt. And then there's a 6-minute one on stagflation that's quite interesting. So I'd like to play them. Would that interest people?
It looks like most people are interested.
Okay, let's play the first one,
Sure.
Stan. On
Hey, I'm getting it up right now.
okay.
The government's plan for a digital dollar isn't just theory anymore.
If there's ads that come, just click on them.
The rise of the digital.
The U.S. national debt.
Okay, I got to get the share going here.
Okay, thank you, Stan. I'm sorry about the promo stuff. It's impossible to get away from. But I think it did a good job of explaining some of the dynamics that we're dealing with the dead. Okay, time to start calling on people. Who's first, Tom?
Chris is first.
Who is? Chris.
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 Very interesting video. I have a question. I'm not an expert on economics. I have a question about inflating away the debt.
What's the question?
One is that it seems like that is unfair to people who have made loans a long time ago. They are not getting value for their purchase. They're being paid with cheaper money, and they're not having their investment returned in kind.
Mm-hmm.
And do you agree with that? And the other thing is that inflating away the debt, if that's an option, it seems to me like that would really discourage loans, because the people who are going to make the loans can see that they're going to get paid back in cheap money, and the buying power of that money is going to be nothing like the buying power of the money that they loaned, and so they're losing money. So it seems to me like those two things considered together makes inflating away the debt even worse than this gentleman said. And it seems that it would be impossible to do.
So when my father was young, they had no money. Okay. So he made a living standing on the intersection between Lake Street and Hennepin, selling grab bags. He would run up to a car, and he'd knock on the door and he'd try to sell them. He'd say, "There is grab bags. There's a watch in here. There's a watch in here." Okay. And the person would say, "What kind of watch is it?" And my father would say, "It's a Hoogie Boogie watch." Okay. Which means it didn't work. Okay. And that's what inflating away the debt is. It's a Hoogie Boogie. Okay. It's trying to say that there's a way to deal with this if everything works perfectly and there's no other implications beyond devaluing the debt. But there's many implications beyond devaluing the debt. and you pointed out too, and I'm sure there's many more. I mean, the individual who is on any kind of a fixed kind of cash flow in their retirement gets totally slaughtered in this. In addition to that, the inflation rates go up and down, but past inflation rates still live with us, and so it becomes kind of like impossible, in my opinion. It's a hoogie boogie argument. There's another one. There's another one that is called modern money theory. Okay, which is that you can keep printing as much money as you want because if inflation does go up, we'll deal with it. And they never really say how they're going to deal with it, but they'll find a way to deal with it. And that's called a modern monetary theory. And it's another hoogie boogie argument. The real truth is we have a debt and it's going up. And every time it goes up, we're more fragile, especially if it goes up more than the GDP goes up. So, and it is systematically going up more than the GDP is going up. So let's deal with some of the, who's next, Tom?
I'm next. And
Okay.
the others. I just wanted to comment on some assumptions or statements that he made that to me do not ring true. He said that as inflation increases, among other things, wages go up. Well,
not always.
That's the problem. The wages do not go up as much as inflation. And that's been true for I don't know, a number of decades, pretty much since the 70s or early 80s. So people really don't have more money to spend to stimulate the economy. If wages actually were increased to keep pace with inflation, we probably would be in a better place than we are now.
So what do you think happens if inflation goes up, but wages do not go up commensurate with inflation? What eventually happens?
Well, a number of things, but one of them is that the money, the stimulation from inflation basically flows to the top. The
Correct.
rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And that creates really, if you can reverse that, give more money to the poor, the people who really need it, that would stimulate the economy more and help erase the deficit. But the opposite is happening.
I think you eventually get stagflation because
stagflation is no good.
Yes. If you want to, Chris, we could talk someday, you and I, or we openly about this concept of meritocracy, because theoretically, meritocracy makes sense to me, but in practice, it doesn't seem to be working. I don't know how we're saying that, how we're valuing merit and meritocracy, and how we're really dealing with it. Are we really, do we, as a society, as an economy, do we really believe in merit? And how are we defining merit? This might be a whole nother meeting, but when I think of merit, I think of you, Chris. So
thank you. Be great to get together and talk about that.
yeah.
Dean,
Who's next?
Dean.
Let me unmute thyself. Yeah, well, I've got 4 pages of notes here. Who is the economist? Robert Reich? The short guy?
Yeah, the guy who
And
came up, he came up short. Yeah.
Yeah, he talked about this, and he said, well,
Ooh, bad pun.
well, I mean, no, it's not opinion. And by the way, economists are my favorite pseudoscientists, because economics is no more a science than astrology, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Because they have math
It's an
in it.
art form at best, and art is very subjective, right?
Yeah, right.
Eye of the beholder. But anyway, yeah, he said, and you know, I don't know, bankruptcy. So he said, well, at some point, we'll just declare bankruptcy. I'm okay, you're okay. And inflating your way out of debt is just a slow de facto bankruptcy. And yeah, I don't know. And meritocracy, I'll go down to the last one. So our current meritocracy is Elon Musk brains and Mark Zuckerberg and the guy with worms in his brain. Well, there you go.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to deal. I think that rewarding merit is a good thing. I'm not sure the way we do it.
You have to define merit.
That is correct. Who's next?
Looks like David's next.
David. Hi.
It's complicated.
Don't do that.
It's like this too shall pass.
We know that.
Well, we don't have good ways for dealing with complex systems. The best way we have to understand complex systems is to model it on computers and try different things. And we can try different things to influence complex systems. But mostly, we can't control them. We can influence them. And we're not even doing that.
Well, let me interrupt you for just a second.
A couple of points.
Okay.
The Federal Reserve is not the national bank. It's a private institution. So allowing them to print money puts more money in the hands of the rich.
What's the second?
That's a huge problem.
What's the second point?
The other thing is they are tasked with doing three different things that are mutually incompatible. And so they're never going to do all three well. The only way to solve our economic problems is to change the rules. And we're not about to do that.
What are the three things that they have to do?
The three things that the Fed wants.
That's a whole nother presentation.
Yeah, but the three things are controlling
full employment,
right. Mm-hmm.
Full employment,
inflation,
minimal inflation, or not excessive inflation,
and a balance and a stable dollar.
Yeah.
Those,
they all impact in a feedback system, in a feedback loop, but unfortunately, they don't all impact the same direction. So
But let's just simplify this for just 1 second, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Whenever the federal debt increases more than GDP increases, the economy becomes more fragile. That's not complex. Is that too complex?
Well, it's a feedback system. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay.
That seems to be pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is, as a nation, we're not dealing with it. We don't really understand it. We don't care to understand it. We're just going forward. Okay. And now there are people who say that because we are the we are the money, I forget what they call it, but we're the form of currency for the world's trade. Yeah, that this doesn't matter, but I don't believe that. I think it's another hoogie boogie argument. Okay.
Well, but you have to look at all of the different things that are feeding back into our economy. And if you were to make a model, you would find that your model didn't match reality until you put in some of these feedback loops. and it's complicated. There's no
Yeah,
question about that.
David, I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know about you, but I actually, a good portion of what we spend each month does come from Social Security. And when I get sick, if I get really sick, especially, Medicare is going to help a lot. But because I'm 76 years old and I'm not really a productive worker any longer. It can be argued I never was, but they did pay me. Okay. So the only thing that's left after all the revenue that we take is to cut things like defense or education or anything that's discretionary. And those discretionary things are important. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I can see it as a problem that's going to have to be solved. So, who's next?
Wayne.
Wayne.
Yes.
Hi, Wayne.
Hello there. Most interesting video. A couple of points. As a person who worked on the federal budget for 30 years and being a deficit hawk, it's always been a horrible thing for me. But this isn't just a US problem. A lot of other industrial countries also have a similar problem. The Chinese, some estimates are 200 to 300% of debt to GDP there. But it's hard to get reliable information on China. But most of the Europeans are like the Brits, were always the good people, balanced budget and everything. But in the past few years, they went away from that. I'm glad to see at least Australia is keeping a balanced budget. So when I have to flee the country, I'll go there, have a really good economy. The monitor is inflating the debt away is sometimes talked about by economists. Sometimes called monetization of the debt because they don't want to say inflation.
You could monetize the debt. Yes.
That's how they do it. The trouble is the speaker pointed out, you can easily get hyperinflation very easy. If economics was a science, you could pinpoint, expand, increase inflation, but not increase it so much it'll be run away. But it's not a science. The trouble is the American people have given two conflicting bits to the policy people. Namely, one, we don't want to see that much cut in the federal budget. We want to keep Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And then the other saying we want to keep defense. All right, once you get rid of all those, there's nothing really left in the federal budget that you can really do.
That's the problem. That's the problem, Wayne.
Right, and that's the problem. However, American people are also saying we don't want our taxes to increase.
Even if we increase taxes, okay, if we increase taxes, it's not going to increase GDP. It'll decrease GDP. So, there's
it depends on where you increase the taxes on. You could argue that if you tax the top 1% in a much more equitable tax rate than currently, you could get some stuff. But
I think from my point of view that would be good, but I don't know how much it is. I just don't think it's that. I don't know how much it is. Are they going to start taxing assets that have not been sold, so they'll have to sell assets? Because if you take a farmer who has land and stuff, they don't have liquidity, and even if you take someone like Elon Musk, God forbid, and he's got liquidity, but if he starts selling to pay all these taxes and stuff, it affects a bunch of other stuff. It's again like David says, this is a complex problem. I don't know how to solve the damn problem, but I see the problem, and I don't see it getting better. I see it getting worse. The next 6-minute one we're going to do is on stagflation. When the CBO makes predictions on what's going to happen, okay, again, they never talk about what happens if there's stagflation. What they say is if if the GDP rises at this average rate and inflation averages at this rate, then this is what will happen. But that's not what happens. Okay. Stagflation could come, and the next one we'll talk about stagflation, which I think is a big threat. It's not a threat because he's going to talk about Trump a little bit, but I don't think it's really Trump that's the problem. The problem is that the longer we keep this type of stuff going, the more fragile we are to something like stagflation. And all stagflation means is that GDP goes down, but inflation rises, and that's a real problem.
I
You know,
think
quick response. Just a quick response to you, since there's so many others.
Okay.
People. Yeah, a wealth tax is talked about, and it's very popular on the progressives. It's horrible for the right. In fact, Elon Musk, who you quoted or referenced, he said that he would leave the country if we did a wealth tax, which I'm going, ooh, a twofer. So
well, not only that, I don't know how they would monitor or institute a wealth tax. I mean, I understand a transaction, but I don't understand a wealth tax. Wealth goes up, you tax it. Wealth goes down, do you give them a refund? I mean, I don't understand. So
It's excess wealth that you tax.
Excess
define
wealth.
that.
Oh,
Yeah, anyway, I do have a question for you, Bob. In that,
okay.
The way we're going here, there's still 5 or 6 hands up.
Yeah.
And you have another video to show. It looks like we're not going to get to the AI portion.
Yeah, I can do it. I mean, in
Is that
3
okay?
months. Yeah, I don't care.
Okay.
My wife.
You guys are all fascinating, but yeah, let's watch the video, please.
Yeah, let's watch the 6-minute video about stagflation. Then we can answer questions afterwards.
Okay.
Nuriel Rubini, very interesting guy. We'll be talking. Okay. Let's go to questions. Who's next?
Eric Bothan is next.
Eric, please. Sorry about everything.
Okay. I had a question on the
1 second, Eric. One second.
Okay.
Okay, Dean had his hand physically up, but I see he finally did the reaction hand. So okay, we can continue.
I'm last. It's just every time Zoom, don't get me going on Zoom. I could do a presentation on how effed up Zoom is. But yeah, as in Zoom could keep track of the hands and put a list for the moderator. And you just check them off, but don't get me going.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay. The question on the meritocracy, I actually watched a YouTube recently on it. It's interesting that the higher the belief in meritocracy in a country, the greater the wealth inequality. That's called the Gatsby curve, with Brazil being at the highest. So that could be something, and I'm thinking a remedy to that. Also, especially as it relates to AI and possibly future presentations, is maybe we could make like CRISPR gene therapy and maybe nootropics like modafinil available to the poorest among us, or that of course they could reject that, but then that would constitute a new understanding of what merit is or not, or we could reject it altogether, and the new the new innovations will just be the product of the rich who can afford it, and at that point it seems as if oligarchy is then set in stone.
Yeah, well, I think
So
I think you're right about all that. What was the YouTube presentation? Do you remember?
It was a Swedish guy. It's on my other phone. I'd have to look.
Okay, we'll go to the next person then. Okay.
So I'll see if I can put it in the
chat. That'd be good. Thank you.
Stan's next, but he's not at his desk again.
Okay.
So, go ahead, Carol.
Carol's not at her desk either.
Okay, then it's David. Go ahead.
My guitar playing must have put them all to sleep.
David.
Right. There's a good book that I would like to recommend, Ellen Brown, regarding banking.
What's it called?
She's got 2 or 3. The most recent one I would recommend. And there's another good book that I'd like to recommend for anybody who's thinking about Bitcoin and digital money. It's called Easy Money.
Well, is it Dylan as in Bob Dylan?
No.
Oh.
I'll put both of those links in the chat after
okay.
I get done talking, I guess.
Okay.
Or after I get done listening.
Okay.
But the whole question of fairness and the big easy concepts, if you will, that you were kind of trying to talk about, when Social Security was put in, it was because we had a lot of older people who were becoming unhealthy and unable to work. And we had a lot of young people that needed jobs. And so it was kind of a bill of goods we got sold, because most people didn't live to their retirement age at that point in time. And so it was a nice idea that was going to help in a couple of respects. But it was a flim-flam. It was snake oil. It was
Hoogie
a
boogie.
Ponzi scheme. Hoogie, yeah, as you said.
Oogie boogie.
And so
democracies tend to do.
We've been promised a bill of goods that cannot be delivered. It's just never going to happen. So thinking that there should be a retirement program, the only people who get that are the rich. We cannot afford as a country to provide that for everyone that we've promised it to, in the respect that we're trying to inflate our way out of the debt that's also a problem. And so the whole question of fairness is a whole presentation period discussion by itself.
The future of fairness. Okay.
Yep. Or how important should fairness be in our political process?
Define fairness.
It's like pornography. It's really tough to define, but I pretty well know it when I see it.
Hey, Stan, you're next.
I would like to just mention that I'm a big YouTube person. There's a BBC on Oliver Cromwell that I think speaks to the issue of meritocracy. Of course, for him, it was his particular way of hiring for warfare by merit versus the royals. And I think that it seems noble, it seems fair, and it seems that it's going to work. It seems like a better solution than what's already in there. But after he became a little bit more powerful in terms of his stature within the army and within the country, his own soldiers began to doubt whether it was really fair. In other words, there's macro fairness and micro fairness, and there's all these different levels and challenges to this. It's chaos. I mean, it's a whole chaos theory. Or like
Chris, we're going to have a great discussion.
Trying to direct cats versus dogs, versus, and that's going to be. I mean, maybe the AI is going to be the only tool that we can use because it has the ability to be a little bit more nuanced about things. I remember when Hobbasis was trying to win against Lee Sedol in the Korean, the AlphaGo problem with Go he was concerned that his software was going off into hallucinations and so forth. And that was something that they were able to fix by a second generation of software design called Alpha Zero, which eventually folded into AlphaFold or Unreal and AlphaFold. So there may be some options there, but I think that the challenge with AI learning things is that it doesn't let us know very well about what its blueprint is and how it's designed the problem that we can understand. If we could get that sort of transparency from the AI so that we could say, this is how you're doing it, that would be illuminating.
Thank you. Thank you, Stan.
Carol.
Yeah, this is a question for Bob, because I'm not really sure that my analysis is accurate, but I seem to remember 2 times in recent history where the country was in worse shape economically than it is now. The first one was in approximately 1979, when the prime interest rate hit 21%. Major. And the second one was, and I'm iffier on this, the mess that Obama inherited, where they were having to bail out the auto companies, hopefully without total collapse of the government. And it seems to me that we managed to back off from both of these closer to disaster than we are now. First of all, would you agree that these were 2 times when the economy was in more trouble than it is now?
There's something called the Roaring Twenties. Okay. And so the Roaring Twenties took place just before the Great Depression. And there was also a time of roaring before inflation took hold during the late 1970s. What happened, and so I think we're in one of those, I think we may be in one of those stages, and that if we keep trying to print money to keep generating GDP, that eventually we may find ourselves in another one of those predicaments. One was highly deflationary and one was highly inflationary, but they were both predicated by extreme bull runs, and we're in the midst of an extraordinary bull run right now. Then with regards to what happened with issuing mortgages that were not really worth issuing, and then cutting them up into it's called financialization, cutting them up into different, what they call tranches, and selling them off to institutions and publics until the whole thing went kabang. That was a unique situation caused by extraordinary greed and a great deal of stupidity by our government regulators. So I find that, I would say that was a unique situation, and it was handled in a unique way. The other things were much more like we're seeing right now. Certainly Bitcoin worries me, but I don't understand Bitcoin. So I guess it's just beyond my capacity, but I don't know how we can replace our monetary system with Bitcoin, but
No, you won't.
yeah, but that's what I would say about it.
Well, Bitcoin is very destructive of the environment, which nobody seems to see as a problem.
I don't even know how, but it doesn't matter because I don't really understand Bitcoin. But that is one of the things that for me is kind of a black swan because it's out there fomenting, and I don't really understand it. I've tried, and I'll try again, but so far I don't. But I think
Read
that
Easy Money.
we're in the midst of a bull run right now, and we're doing that without really understanding what happens at the end of a bull run when you create that bull run by just printing money. But it tends to be something bad.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so
one thing that I noticed during the 1979 crisis,
mhm,
that was the one where the prime interest rate hit 21%,
yeah,
was that I was a renter at that time. I was renting houses. I mean,
mhm,
I was looking for a house to live in and pay rent to somebody else.
I see. Yeah.
And at that time, it was impossible to buy a house, holding a current mortgage and to rent that house out for enough to cover the mortgage payments.
Well, certainly at 21%, it probably was. Yeah.
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 And that told me right there that we were in a bubble.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are people who are quote unquote experts who think that we're going to be just fine, and that we will muddle through, and that we're not in the near the end of a bull run. We're just sort of in the beginning or the middle, and they can make a convincing case. And I'm not trying to say that I know better than them, but I'm just saying that there's this thought in my mind that when the federal debt increases more than GDP, we become more fragile in every single way, not just in economics.
Totally agree with you.
We become more fragile culturally. We become more fragile militarily. We become more fragile politically. That's all I'm trying to say, and that we, as people who are futurists or want to think about the future, need to consider this. Okay, I'll give you here's an example. I was invited to I don't even know why, to attend a meeting of a Zoom meeting of people who are doing AI research into medical advancements. How do you use AI for medical advancements? Serious people who are actually working in it, but they're all 25 to 35 years old, and they don't understand that the real problem is not necessarily that they can cure some disease here. The real problem is the cost of health insurance is going up 7 to 12% per year.
Yeah.
Okay. And people are living until my parents lived till they were 95. Shit, I could be alive at 240. Who knows what's going to happen? So, they didn't even conceive that they could use AI to deal with the cost of healthcare because there's no cost for them. They're young and they're not sick. So, I mean, this is we've got to wrap our hands around this issue of debt, and we've got to find a way to solve it, or eventually I believe that the house of cards will fall down, and so that. But that's just one
What
guy's
form do
opinion.
you see
I
this
don't.
price taking?
I believe I believe that when I came out of my mother, they slapped my ass and I said, "Oh my God, there's going to be a financial collapse." But I was a very, very advanced baby. I'm always worried about this, but when the stock market goes like this and debt goes, I don't know if you can see me, when the stock market goes like this and debt goes like this, it never really works out. And the more debt we have, the more fragile we are, which means that whatever happens that damaging is, whatever that's going to be, because it's probably not going to be the financialization of mortgage debt, but whatever happens, we're in a very fragile situation, and it does concern me, not just for myself, but more for my kid and my grandkids. And the other thing that concerns me is jobs. So I don't know what's going to happen with jobs when the robots come. So I mean, so I'm just trying to bring some of these things to everybody's attention. That's all.
Okay.
Who's next?
I am. I have a couple points. One on Bitcoin. If we start relying on Bitcoin, that could in a way debase U.S. currency.
Well, it should.
I
It
worry
should.
about that because
Mhm.
that would imperil our status as leaders of the free world, and it would also imperil all other world economies too. So I think we have to be very careful about proceeding in promoting Bitcoin and
Which
other
makes
types
me
of currency,
wonder why a person as brilliant as Elon Musk.
because
Okay.
he'll benefit from it.
Yeah, well, I don't
And
want to
that's
think.
why he likes tariffs too, because
I
it eliminates competition from.
I don't want to think that about him, but it seems that I should, because it seems obvious. But um, uh, anyway.
Oh, okay. And my other points was in the last 8 years or so, I'd say the two main contributors to our our decrease in income on the federal level and increase in inflation were, number one, the 2017 tax changes, which greatly decreased what the rich had to pay. Actually, I had to pay. I calculated my taxes two ways that year, one under the old rules, one under the new rules. I had to pay about $1,000 more under the new rules. It wasn't a tax cut for me. It was a tax cut for the rich people. And the other thing was inflation. That was mainly due to disruption of the supply lines because of the pandemic. That had a huge effect. And unfortunately, I don't see the new administration addressing proactively those kinds of problems. I think they might exacerbate them with tax cuts and also, well, during Trump's first administration, he eliminated the agencies that were intended to prevent pandemics and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so,
very prescient of him.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, as you are, I'm not real optimistic about what's going to happen in the next year or two. It's going to look good for a few months, I think, and then we might have problems.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to think about these problems as Trump, okay? Because Trump's now president.
Well, I'm talking about policy.
Yeah, so I want to hope that there's something good that will come out of Trump's presidency. But the point is, regardless of all that, we're still printing money and the debt is still going up, and and we've had a little lapse in inflation, but it could go back up again. Okay. And I mean, I listened to a lot of stuff to actually have this discussion with you guys. There's some logical reasons to assume that it's going to go up. Some that have to do with Trump's policies, some that have nothing to do with Trump's policies. So this is not a Trump issue. We're just in such a fragile place that we're subject to a lot of risk.
Yeah.
Who's
Dean,
next? Who's
Dean.
next? Dean.
You're muted, Dean.
Yep. Okay, and I'm unmuted. Oh, first, Stan, I literally choked on my Kirkland Starbucks coffee when you said we need more transparencies in AI. Are you effing kidding me? AI is the antithesis of transparency. And that's why the people that really, really, really know AI are scared to death of it.
Yeah. The
And,
smarter people are, the higher the risk they
yeah.
predict for the
Oh,
future.
yeah.
HBC.
But tell me about it. And somebody else mentioned, I'll try to hone this down.
Yeah, do hone it down a bit, okay?
I will. All right. So why did productivity not benefit workers, only the capitalists? Because of the demise of unions, pure and simple, and because of union greed. And they, Detroit priced themselves out of the auto market at $40 an hour when $10 was a good wage. And yeah, and by the way, I am still a dues-paying retired union member. I will die a union member because I support. It's the only defense we have: the workers against the capitalists. And there are win-win situations where companies, you make the corporation employee owned, and everybody wins. Everybody wins. It's a win-win-win. Anyway,
You're talking about an ESOP, like an employee-owned stock option plan?
yeah.
Yeah.
And where companies have investors,
Or the union label.
but they've come in and they bought this company, this distressed company, and they said, what if we gave the workers a stock, literally, in the company? Maybe we could turn this thing around in 6 months or a year, and they have. And the employees suddenly cared about the success of the company, because most employees could give a RA about, they just want their paycheck. And when they suddenly felt benefit from doing a good job, from being productive, etc., then they are in general. That's a fact.
Thank you, Dean. Who's next?
Tom.
H-Tom. You're muted, H-Tom.
Ah. Oh, good Lord.
You're on.
Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation, Bob. For my sins, I had to take econ when I was in college. That was 12 credits of, well, it was 12 credits of A, 2 of which I earned in the third quarter. I went to the prof and said, this doesn't make any sense to me. And he looked at my grades. He says, you think it's all magic and hocus pocus and words and politics? And I said, well, yeah. He said, you got it. You got an A for the third quarter. You can skip the final. And I did. It's economics works. It does. But it is politics and babbling and promises and keeping your word. And we live in a culture where those things don't work anymore. And so the economics I was taught doesn't work anymore. The idea of employees becoming capitalists, my God, of course it works. You're working for yourself, not for the man. And as far as printing money, I should warn you, if you have cash buried in your backyard, you should dig it up and take it to the bank and get new cash. Because the federal government has issued I'm not sure what they called it, but $100 bills, the ones you have in your billfold or in your backyard, are going to be, what's the word they used? I don't remember. Anyway, they're printing new ones. And there are a whole bunch of counterfeit ones that they want to take out of circulation. So all $100 bills have to be exchanged sometime in the next, it was 2 years when the announcement was made a month ago. And then they're going to do the same for 50s and 20s and 10s and 5s. They didn't mention ones, but I'm scratching my head. What is this about? And I finally came to the conclusion that what it was that all of those pallets of 100s that we sent to Iraq long ago have been floating around the world in this drug deal and that automobile deal and that other deal over there, but they're totally out of the government's control. And this is an attempt to get it back. I don't think it's going to work. And Dean, I think you're right. The math part of economics works whether or not we like it. But that's not the important part of economics. So.
Who's next? Thank you. Thank you, H-Town.
Dan?
I think that my interest in the stock market was benefited by the idea that I, at one time back in 2018, felt like I would be willing to participate in buying stock if I thought that there would be a dream of a future of a capitalistic society based on solar power and sustainable, and not necessarily the hydrocarbons of the fossil fuel industry. So my question to Bob, to you, Bob, is that once we don't have a debt and once we don't have this fragility that you're concerned about, do you think that we'll be able to go forward and get excited about something other than drill, baby, drill? Or is it the financial, is the financial going to be such that they're going to I'm going to use the Old Testament fossil, New Testament sustainable. Are we going to go back to the Old Testament and just have another party? Or how are we going to manage that level of success that we get once we do? I mean, one thing about Australia, if they're going to use Australia as an example, is that they've gone really strong on solar because they're in a sunny country.
They are.
And that's something like Scotland and Ireland and Norway and a lot of countries have been able to polish their economy by sustainability. And I guess that's one of the things that maybe I hope, pray would be, which is odd for me to say because I don't like.
So think of these 4 words, okay? Faster, less expensive, safer, and more productive. Okay. When you have a technology that meets those 4 criteria, it will win. Okay. There'll be pushback against it, but it will win. These are not my criteria. Whose criteria are these, David?
They're Rethink X.
David, whose criteria are these?
Disruptive innovation.
And who put them down?
Well, it started with Clayton Christensen.
No,
And
that's
Tony
too late.
Seba
Tony
was
Seba.
his
Tony
teacher.
Seba. That's right. You
Uh,
made me read that damn book by Tony Seba. Yes.
But
Okay.
Tony Seba came after Clayton Christensen. Clayton Christensen was a professor at Harvard whose classes and teachings Tony Seba was teaching out at Stanford to Silicon Valley
When
startups.
when clean energy meets those criteria, it will win.
It absolutely is winning. Look at what China has done in the last 5 years. They own solar photovoltaic. There are no solar yeah, well, anyway, the actual cells are made in China, shipped to Southeast Asia for assembly into solar panels, and shipped worldwide at roughly 2/3 of what we can build them for in this country.
So if this continues to be true, and if the price keeps going down and the effectiveness keeps going up, and they're safer, and they deliver energy more consistently, etc. If all these things keep continuing to get better and better, it will win.
Yeah,
And
it's going to win.
it's not going to win
It's
because
unreliable, though.
if it
They're
is unreliable.
reliable for part of the day, and at 3 cents a kilowatt hour versus 15 cents a kilowatt hour from our existing power plants, there's no question what's going to happen.
And in the future, Eric, they may become more reliable. But I'm telling you, when these things take
There's
place,
major
it will-
advances in battery, in cost effectiveness of battery storage.
Storage in San Diego, by the way, our top rate is 52 cents per kilowatt hour.
I'm just talking cost, not sales price.
Oh, gotcha.
There's a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Okay,
anyway,
David,
so
are you
that
done?
Stan, did that help at all, or are you still alive, Stan?
Yeah,
Stan,
well,
but that's when it's going to happen, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
I saw a report on why Musk is getting kind of stagnated in his solar rooftop.
Right.
Because, and the reason is because, and I think this is true for batteries and solar panels, you just can't produce them as well as and as cheap as the Chinese can. And that's probably what people are whispering in Don Trump's ear right now about China, is that we can just make those panels, which are perfectly good and perfectly willing to be able to solve the problem of solar panel for everybody, are basically because Chinese had the insight to do that early, and they spent the money to do that early, and now we're behind.
There are economies of scale.
Yeah.
It's hard to compete with the economies of scale. And to the extent that they're willing and able to produce power cheaply from solar and wind, and China has built more solar and wind than anybody else in the world. That puts their cost of production for energy down much cheaper. They're also using coal. They're getting away from it, maybe.
So if we don't, so what you're saying is if we don't place a 600% tariff on their solar panels, it'll go faster. You are saying that, right?
What I'm saying is that the 600% tariff on solar panels is going to raise the price of solar panels and mean we produce them in this country more slowly and at a higher cost than China does. And it's very possible that solar in the United States will look like solar in Germany, where they're backing off of their support for solar in Germany, because solar doesn't work very well in Germany.
Who's next?
Carol,
Carol. Thank you, David.
Yes, can anybody tell me why, if China is producing all the solar panels in the world, they
Cheaply.
are simultaneously building coal-fired power plants
they still
all
have an
over
energy deficit.
Africa?
They need a lot of energy.
No.
They need a lot of energy in their country. They have a deficit, but yes, they're building a lot of coal. They're doing a lot of coal in Africa. I don't know why.
It's to make money and to guarantee the resources for their manufacturing operation. Their Belt and Road program was loaning money to countries to develop transportation facilities so that they could get the resources back that they build into the products they manufacture. They're the cheapest manufacturing operation in the world because they don't have to make a profit. And they're keeping their population busy. They've taken them out of poverty. It's a complicated system.
Okay, are you done, Carol?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
I just wanted somebody to comment on why China was acting like this.
Okay.
Why aren't they building solar power installations all over Africa?
Because they are using them at home to keep their costs down. They're happy to export coal plants to Africa. They can build them relatively cheaply for Africa, but Africa won't become a competitor that way.
It's like the presentation you had, I don't know, last year or something, Carol, that will do asteroid mining out in space and export all our dirty industry out to space.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric Hand, you're up.
Africa is outer space. Okay.
I wonder, first of all, why my hand keeps getting taken down when I don't touch it.
I'm not taking it down.
And then, secondly, a narrow answer on Bob's topic about the inflation problem and so on. Well, it seems to also imply that in practice, at least universal democracy is inherently unstable and very limited in its life expectancy and durability, because the zombie hordes in reality are never going to stop voting themselves free stuff once they realize they can just vote. And that'll lead to the, probably runaway inflation or deflation, as Bob said, which will lead then to economic collapse of some kind. Then the zombie hordes get desperate and they're willing to listen to somebody who says, I have a solution, but you just have to give me total power to implement it, and they'll agree to that. It seems throughout history that again and again that happens. That's how it goes.
That's hard to argue with, Eric. That's
Okay,
hard to argue with.
Okay. What? You don't
He agrees.
agree with that, you say? Bob?
Yeah, I think he says he agrees.
No.
I agree.
Okay. And then at a wider answer to that, and most more human related problems, is just a lack of adequate innate genetic altruism within the species for a civilization to keep advancing. And
I'm not even sure there is anything called genetic altruism, but we certainly don't. We don't have it. We don't have it.
Even mammals, lions, wolves, prairie dogs, and even in
What is genetic
enough, but not nearly
altruism?
enough to keep civilization from destroying itself and to keep advancing in a.
Well, I hope
It
it's
is
true, and I hope
it
they
is
find it.
hardwired into our species that there is such a thing as genetic altruism.
There is a little bit, but not enough.
Not
a little bit.
Define it.
Yeah,
Huh?
and I'm going to be working on a presentation on Darwin and Eric Ehrlichman, and yeah, we have not nearly enough Darwin. That's the major problem.
Please quit talking about something that you haven't defined.
It's the idea that it refers to the idea that a predisposition towards altruistic behavior can be inherited through genes.
Yeah,
Well,
I
it's
don't know.
good.
I
It's
don't
not
know if
even
Is
this
this the
is
whole-
true.
arguable. I mean, if you
Is
say,
this the whole two nieces are worth of one daughter thing?
huh?
You can believe it or not, but it is science and it is fact.
Well,
Well,
if it's science,
again, I would appreciate a definition before being asked to believe it.
Well, Carol, you were an oxytocin person. That's kind of a version of empathy and moral compass and all that.
With 23andMe, they have found the genes where humans became altruistic, as monkeys and chimpanzees and everybody else were altruistic before we were.
Yeah.
And we have bred that out of our species.
well, I hope we breed it back in.
Yeah, that's the idea. Exactly. That's the biggest solution to the most problems human problems I can think of.
Right, Eric.
Huh?
Define this biggest solution. In 3 or 4 sentences, tell me what it
I
is.
just read the sentence
Altruism?
to
Do you know
you.
what, you don't know what altruism means? I don't understand what you're.
Genetic altruism refers to the idea that a predisposition towards altruistic behavior can be inherited through genes. It's genetic.
Okay, but is this altruistic behavior towards one's kin or toward everybody?
Different level. It can be
Meaning
at
that
different levels depending on the
individuals-
environmental stimuli
Okay,
associated
It's
with it.
both, Carol. It's both.
yeah, here's the rest of what the AI said. This means that individuals with certain genetic variations are more likely to act selflessly, particularly towards close relatives, to indirectly benefit their survival of their shared genes. A concept
Okay.
often explained by kin selection theory.
And it extends to larger and larger groups. For
Okay,
example,
this
someone
is,
asked me once why in the King Kong movies we tend to root for King Kong when he's fighting Godzilla. I said because he's closer genetically to us than
okay.
Godzilla
This
is.
is the whole two nieces are worth one daughter thesis. Yeah.
Well,
I'm getting
In
a
other
little.
words, in
I'm getting
terms,
Carol. I'm getting a little confused.
Yeah.
the math gets very complex, as you get deeper into it. But
especially
what
when you
it's
add
saying
people.
is that people will help out their family, their kin, and that the genetic advantage in terms of your genetic heritage showing up in the next generation
yeah,
means exactly what it says. Two nieces are worth one daughter. You help out your brother's family
yeah.
to that extent, gets your genes into the next generation, just as if you had produced a child.
It's sort of part of one of the arguments why gay genes have persisted.
Why what?
That's part of one of the arguments why gay genes have persisted in evolution, despite they generally don't produce offspring themselves or haven't until recently.
Why? Say the word again.
Gay.
Why gay
Gay.
genes have
for
persisted.
Homosexual.
Homosexuality.
Oh,
Ah, okay.
Gotcha.
Yes, again, that's very much two
Yeah.
nieces are worth one daughter.
Yeah, something like
Because
Okay, we're
homosexuals
getting a little off
tend
topic here.
to
Yeah.
help out there.
okay.
Let's
Let's
get back
go.
on our topic.
Way off topic
Yeah,
now.
It's
Let's
explodes exponentially, the complexity here we're getting into.
So it's 12:01, and
Could
I
I
have to.
put in one comment?
Let's
before
go.
you
Let's
up?
finish this.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead, David.
I would like to mention a little more about the dollar as a reserve currency. You have to consider what else is possible. And the dollar is probably going to remain the reserve currency for the next 5 to 10 years, unless we get into a shooting war with China or Russia, and somebody pushes the button. Mostly because our economy is looking more and more fragile. But everybody else's economy is also looking more and more fragile, and by comparison, ours still looks pretty fair.
Yeah.
If you listen to Peter Zeihan, who has his own biases, but he makes some pretty good points about that particular one.
Okay, guys, thanks for everything. I hope everybody not only enjoyed it, but had some interesting thoughts going in their brain pan. And I will see you next
Oh,
time.
and
Thank you,
wait,
Bob.
wait, before you go, did you get, put in the chat, I didn't have the link, but are you
Okay,
able to find the video that I was referencing from the market exit?
Let me see. Hold on. Don't go away yet. The most material ever made?
Yeah, the worst, meritocracy is a lie. It's way worse, in parentheses, it's way worse than you think, by the channel, The Market Exit. I don't really have to copy.
Wait a second. I'm still looking.
17 minutes and 49 seconds.
Glass is inherently brittle. It is the very symbol we use for fragility. But these days,
Oh, I got it. I got it.
much from this
Okay.
material. We
All
want
right.
it to be
That's it.
Thank you.
transparent,
I got it.
scratch resistant,
I
thin,
got it.
and even
Thank you.
flexible.
Uh-huh.
But most of all, we want it not to
Well,
break.
whoever's
So is
doing
it
that should
possible
stop
to
the
make
video.
unbreakable glass? Well, in this video, I will make the case that glass is one of the most important materials.
Okay, I don't
ever
need to
made.
hear this.
It has transformed how we live, launched numerous scientific revolutions, and forever.
Okay, guys. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so
much. It was great.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Take care.
Bye.